Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Phil, as per usual, and I am joined by Salvatore Manzi, and we're going to be focusing on the art of communication, the ability to speak in front of groups. And where I think that this is going to come really into importance is I guarantee all of the listeners listening to this interact with this on a regular basis. We as adventure educators or experiential educators focus on creating an adventurous experience for our participants. And yet, what we sometimes gloss over is that glossophobia, pun intended, is a fear of public speaking. And it is the number one fear in the entire world. This is not just in the US centric. This is everyone, well, for the most part, larger percentages of the population experience a fear of public speaking. And so, what I want to focus on in this episode is how us as educators, us as facilitators, can improve the way that we might speak in front of our participants. So, Salvatore, that was a long wind up to really ask you why, from your perspective, is it important for us to focus and train ourselves on the skill and the art of communication?
You all make a living with your voice. How you communicate is really how you create impact and influence in the world. And if I'm wanting to have someone go on that adventure of education, experiencing something, they need to first establish trust with me. And the way I do that is both with my vocal, communication, but also with my body language, like the whole art of communication, establishing that rapport and trust at the beginning. You can trust me. We're going to go into something that's going to be uncomfortable. We're going to do something that's going to cause you to expand, and you can trust me to do that. And I can't get other people to trust me if I can't communicate in a way that connects with them and clearly conveys what it is that I'm hoping to accomplish with them as well.
Yeah, I think that I was talking to someone recently. We were discussing this idea of when I was initially taught the art of facilitation as an educational model, it was about removing myself as the educator and putting more of the spotlight on the group. I've since come to have a change in mindset around not diminishing the power of this person who's educating. It from a facilitator perspective, we, as you just said, we bring so much, not just our voice, but our actions. Where have you seen the importance of that? Do you have a story that would like highlight how the sharing of yourself has benefit to a group?
There is an activity called If You Really Knew Me. You might be familiar with it, right? And there is an opportunity to stay surface or go beneath the surface. And I love it when people do the If You Really Knew Me, If You Really, Really Knew Me. 2 rounds, right? Where we do the superficial, I really like hamburgers over tacos, which is insane. Nobody likes hamburgers over tacos. But like one that could be the surface one. And then the second one is like I'm an only child who lost a relative when I was young or something like on a deeper level. And there's an inherent risk in opening up in that if you really knew me, but it's that opening that creates the trust and the bond. So your question is like you're asking for an example of where like communicating in a way that creates that opening will drive forward the rest of the program. And I think there is something in the facilitator showing up fully authentically themselves, not performing. That's when a person starts to feel like, okay, I can trust this person. And then that person is able to, as a facilitator, step back and let them have their moment, but keeping their eye on the ball and touching and nudging the ball forward through their own, like taking that spotlight and turning it to somebody else. I'll share this. I'm an introvert. And people often ask me as an introvert, why do I like learn the art of communication? And it's simply because it was the scariest thing I could do. I needed to get over my fear of being speaking one to many. But the thing I realized is as the person that was speaking, I control the spotlight. And like I can turn that spotlight to whomever. And then as an introvert, I'm not sitting in the audience waiting for that unknown moment where they're like, what about you? I can actually be the one directing the spotlight and coaxing. And because I'm introverted, I know how to be more gentle in guiding that spotlight. So I feel like I kind of lost the question in there, but like the idea of like self-revealing vulnerability and that if you really knew me, like finding a place that's authentic to share and then owning the spotlight, but driving it gently throughout the participants as they experience whatever they're going through.
Yeah, I'm resonating because I describe myself as a professional extrovert, but a personal introvert. So I absolutely am the same way in the, consider battery level of like energy, and absolutely being thrown on the spot is a very intimidating space to be in. So having some control over that as the person who's leading the program or the group, is definitely a way to be able to mitigate some of that introversion, because you have a period of control. I also want to highlight it. If you really knew me activity, I've recently been doing a modification on it, which I've been calling alternative introductions. And the framework is that I start everyone finding a pair, and I'm giving each person a minute to introduce themselves to their partner, share whatever they feel most comfortable introducing themselves. Typically, the introductions in the first round of this are, I would say, that elevator speech of where you're from, who you are, and the families, all of the same things, but they don't really connect people. The second round, I say we're going to find a new partner. You've each got a minute once again, but this time you can say nothing which you previously said in your last minute. So we eliminate all of that first one, and there's a lot of pressure, right? Like, oh, what else do I say? What I tend to find is that in that second minute, where we've scrapped all of the previous information, that's when people go deep and they start to talk about their vulnerabilities, themselves, their emotions, their reactions. And that's so much more connective from a connective tissue perspective than the what's the whys, of human beings. I think that there's just deepness there. So I appreciate your reflection on if you really knew me, because I absolutely resonate.
I love that you changed that activity and turned it into something else. I love the idea that you can't use any of the first material in the second. Like it stretches the brain, it forces them. I love what you've done with that whole activity. The idea that I need to speak on the spot and introduce myself is such a critical component. And we do all go into the performative nature of like, let me just tell you my general, like, this is, hi, my name is so and so, and this is what I do kind of thing. And that I think is the challenge that a lot of people overlook. Too many times we get in a meeting and the meeting starts the same way. Every meeting starts with, hi, everyone, I'm excited to be here. I'm glad we're going to be blah, blah, blah. People have tuned out. People have already tuned out. Like, this is the same. I don't want to listen to the same. The idea of the art of communication is finding a way to grab them right at the beginning. They call it a hook sometimes, but finding a way to do something a little bit different as you're starting your communication to re-engage, they engage and re-engage. Research shows that the mind needs novelty. You brought up novelty before. The mind needs novelty to stay engaged. And too often times we do a download versus a dialogue, right? We download all of our material. The brain is primed to need a new sense of novelty every 3 to 5 minutes. TED Talks, if you ever watch TED Talks, they are scheduled 18 minutes and they have beats. Beats at about every 4 minutes. There's a change in tone. There's a change in slides. Some change. TV shows and films have beats as well. Those beats are 2 to 5 minutes where they shift the character, they shift the scene or shift the thing. Same thing with communicating, whether you're facilitating or presenting. If I'm not doing something to re-engage and create novelty within every 3 to 5 minutes, some sort of pattern disruption, I have lost my audience. They have tuned out. They're back on their phones or they're making lunch plans in their brain or whatever. So eliminate that first round of what you usually say and try something different each time is a great exercise to expand your own art of communication and improvement.
I think anyone who's ever been in a training that I've led, we all know my introduction tends to be something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm Phil. The sound you hear is England," and I've added that because it gets a little bit of a giggle and is different. What would be something that? How do you introduce yourself? What advice would you get on? Like, yeah, you can change it, but what should we change it to?
You know how everybody experiences a sense of fear when they get up to speak in front of a group of people? Well, hi, my name is Salvatore. I'm a communications coach, and and I'll go into it. That's what I recommend is you, then me. My number one principle of communication is you, then me. If I can talk about you, make what I have to say relevant to you in some way before I get to me, then you're more likely to engage with it. I like to share a very hard truth with people. When I don't know if you probably heard it a million times. Hi, everyone. My name is Salvatore and I'm da. They'll start with this, right? People don't care who you are until they know why you are speaking. So there needs to be a minute of relevance before you get to your name. Otherwise, they're going to forget your name. They're not even going to hear their name, especially if they're going around the room and everybody's saying their name. They're going to forget it. Start with you, then me. Find a way to one sentence make yourself or your point relevant to them before dropping in who you are and why you're speaking. And you're sure to create that relevance.
So I want to just reiterate for the listeners' benefit, start with the why before you get onto the what of your name. Awesome. I love that. You mention often in some of your talks and on your website this idea of presence, creating presence, the importance of presence, and you say presence under pressure. What do you mean by presence as you're coming into a space? Because that might mean different things to different people. What do you mean by it?
Presence determines impact. You are being viewed before you open your mouth, and communication is multi-channel. People are noticing your posture, your facial expression, your gestures, your movements before any words come out. Presence is conveyed long before any information is shared, and presence determines impact. How you show up, how you present yourself is going to determine whether people immediately trust you or become skeptical about what you want to say. And presence is not easy. It's hard to define, really. When you ask somebody what creates presence, everybody has a different answer. Everybody is looking for a slightly different, nuanced version of what creates presence. So I would challenge all the listeners, think in your mind, who has presence? Who do you think of when you think of presence? That person has presence. They walk into the room lights up, versus the person who walks out of the room and the room lights up, right? Like that's the presence. They come in and they cause you to lean in. And what is it that they're doing? What is it that creates that it factor that causes you to lean in? When you're able to identify it, then you're able to start emulating and adding it. I have theories, but let me just ask you, when you think of presence, who's somebody in your life that has presence, and what is it about them that creates that sense of presence?
Yeah, and this is because I definitely have people in mind. And what the word that's coming to mind is charisma. But
Mm.
charisma feels like an unattainable, like it feels like someone naturally has this thing, right? If they walk into a room, and I'm not sure I would know how to replicate or emulate that same experience of what that feels like. It can charisma be taught? You have more experience in working with this than maybe myself, but what is that, a taught skill, or is it something else entirely?
Absolutely, it can be taught. And I think that you are onto something, that we tend to label it as charisma because we can't find another way of looking at it or defining it. I would offer there's a YouTube channel, Charisma on Command. Forgetting the gentleman's name, but he has years worth of content to look at how you can refine and work on creating a sense of charisma. The idea is, though, for me, it's that there's something compelling. That person is compelling. That's what I tend to say. That person is compelling. There's something about the way that they talk, the way they carry themselves. I want to say it's charisma, but there's something else to it. For me, the essence is when authenticity meets comfort. Does that person convey a sense of comfort in being who they are in the moment? And if so, then there's some kind of charisma to wanting to follow and listen and engage further. To get to that place of comfort meets authenticity, we have to have a sense of self-reflection, like knowing where we are and what's our current state, and room reflection. Like we need to have a sense of what's going on in the room and be present to like the energy and present to how people are responding to our share. Those two things come together in my mind and start to create the essence of presence for it.
I wonder, like, do we have to almost let go of, there's a people pleasing mindset of like, I want everyone to like me. Do I have to let go that not everyone is going to resonate with my authentic, comfortable state? Because
Phil, you're
that feels like if I'm in a group of 500 people, I think sometimes when I get up on stage, I'm trying to think like, how can I capture the attention of all people, but they might not like who I am. I don't know, like that's that internal imposter syndrome. I know that that's a phrase that gets used a lot, like around like, why should anyone listen to me? And so sometimes there is this phrase of fake it till you make it, and I don't like it because people can read through the BS. But you're, I think you're trying to put a mask on because I'm nervous that if I took the mask off, people won't like what they see.
There's so much to unpack that you just like shared right there. Imposter syndrome, people pleasing, mask, performance, fake it till you make it. Like, where do we start? Like, I want to break down each one of those items. First of all, about a quarter of my clients come to me because they are trapped in a pleasing tendency, whether they're striving to get validation or they learned as a child that if they make other people happy, then they can be happy. And there's this like loop of this is what's going to work. And it's worth stating the things that got us to where we are not necessarily the things that are going to get us to where we want to go. So analyzing those tendencies, looking for the feedback loop that we got when we were younger, and asking ourselves, is that going to work going forward? Like, people pleasing is a genuine thing. And I think it actually is a good thing, because the opposite is sort of like, we don't want to be around that person, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, there is the people pleasing. And what is driving it? It could be the imposter syndrome, right? Like, I learned as a child that, or I believed as a child that if I'm perfect, people will like me. I don't know where that really took root, but my imposter monster will tell me that unless I'm perfect, no one's going to like me. And so I named it. I named my imposter monster Perry the perfectionist. And I began a relationship with Perry. Like, I noticed when Perry was talking. I noticed when Perry was raging. I went back and forth with Perry, and I would tell Perry, look, I'm going to get up and speak. I need you to sit over there until we're done. And in working with that perfectionist mindset, my imposter, then it disconnected that belief from driving the bus, enabled me to be more present. When I'm working with clients, I have a whole set of techniques to help reestablish one's mental emotional state. One of those is directing where we put the mind's eye, where we focus, right? Because left uninhibited, the brain is going to look for negativity and danger. We have a negativity bias. We're always looking for risk. So if we don't have some sort of controls, the brain is automatically going to be looking for risk and danger. This is why public speaking is so scary. We get up in front of people, we got a bunch of hungry eyes looking at us. Like, yeah, we're going to be like overnerved. But if I have an internal sense that I know the purpose of why I'm speaking, I have my why, and I know the value of what I have to share, then that fear isn't going to take hold as much. I'm going to be driven with intentionality towards that. I'll stop there and see what you have to add
I
there.
just do when you're crafting something, you're saying how much of it is really drafted and scripted out
Mm.
versus you're just talking. Because I reflect on, as you were saying this, moments where I have felt like my imposter monster, and I like that phrase, has kind of been speaking, and I know that I'm, when you're like, you can look down at yourself speaking, like, what the hell am I saying right now?
What am I saying now?
I am rambling, and I've lost that coherence. How much can be planned, or do you just let people, in order to feel comfortable, do we have to offset the plan? Like
Right.
there seems to be a conflict between those 2 points, planning versus non-planning.
Oh my God, the art of communication right there. And I would recommend to anybody listening, go take an improv class to learn exactly what you're talking, finding that balance between structure and free flow. And what we want from an audience perspective is the sense of free flow. This is just a full free flow. But if I'm the speaker, I need to have some structure. I need to have some idea of where I'm going. I spent nearly a decade coming up with frameworks for content, how to make sure that my content is understandable, processable, memorable for my listener. And a lot of this is based on Bernice McCarthy's work. I don't know if you're familiar with her. Yeah, the four questions: why, what, how, and what if. Answering or framing my content in that way will help my listener follow. And I've used that framework for so long, it's muscle memory now. So I can flow with my answer and make it sound like I'm not faking it until I make it. I would advise, though, anybody who wants to make a point needs to have that point ready. And the idea I have is to talk in sound bites. If you can start out whatever your answer is with a pithy one line statement, your opinion, a judgment, maybe a statistic of fact, but if you can start with something that is like on point and memorable, you have the maximum chance of them remembering or engaging with what you're actually saying. So it's a bit of both. I would say have a structure in mind that you're going to follow, a framework. Have your point succinct enough, concise enough that you can iterate it in a way that sounds compelling and then flow from there. If I could just double click on your fake it till you make it thing, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important to know that it's in the fake it till we make it that we get out of our own tendencies. I've been conditioned. I grew up in a small Midwest town, very conservative, very mindset. Like I could talk about that. If I were to keep operating from that, I would never actually rise in the ranks of who I am meant to be. So I need to fake it sometimes to get outside of my comfort zone until that loop gets broken and I can start operating from a new system.
Yeah, I wonder if can the concepts that you're talking about, can they be taught to somebody who's green, new, or is it beneficial that they have that experience to be able to draw from to say, I can shift that? Do we have to, what I'm sort of suggesting is, do we need people, do people need to flop in order to succeed? Or can they just succeed? Because I work with like students straight out of college who are like, oh, tell me how do I facilitate? And sometimes my go-to is honestly, you got to have some experiences to be behind you before you can get to that point of succeeding.
Mm.
Because I think there's so much value in the mistake making process.
100%. Like there's two mindsets that I have on this. Research shows that when we watch somebody experience something, it creates the same synapses firing experiential in our own brain. So if I can observe somebody failing, I will learn from that failure, which is why I invite people to come work with me. I have had so many mistakes. You're going to learn a lot from me because I went through trial by fire. My approach was, okay, public speaking is the scariest thing. I'm going to throw myself into the fire as often as I can until I learn. There's essence in both. They say that knowledge is learned, wisdom is experience. So learn, watch people, see what you can from that. But wisdom is truly going to come when you apply it, where you find out where you succeeded and failed. And if I could just press in on that a little bit, our mind, negativity bias, after I get up to speak, after I've led a facilitation experience, my brain is coming up with a dozen things that I did wrong. And that is not helpful. I need to start by naming at least three things I did well and then give myself permission to look for the better then, right? But as Maya Angelou says, I can't see the back of my head. So we need somebody who's going to offer us objective feedback on how we're doing and how we came across. Otherwise, we're not really going to grow. Practice makes permanent, not perfect. Practice makes permanent. Unless I get feedback from somebody else of how I'm coming across, I'm going to keep like digging the same groove over and over.
Yeah. I wonder if storytelling, and the reason I lean towards storytelling seems to me to be that connective, like it connects people on a why level. I just want to highlight as well as we relate to storytelling that I appreciate on your website and in conversations I've heard of you speak before, you're very open about the failings you had at the start, like you flopped in front of audiences. And I think that it's that isn't talked about enough because I think the reason that people struggle is they look at someone who's been doing it for a while, look at them on a stage, go, the gap between where I am now and where that person is too big. And so therefore I can't make it. But I think if you ask most people who are in the public speaking realms, they incrementally grew and made tons of mistakes along the way and probably flopped way more. You see it with stand up comedians and others who are in front of a stage. They talk about all the times they've failed. I don't think that we do that enough. So I encourage people to know that I have definitely made fails. In fact, I just had a podcast episode on a mistake I made on a ropes course. But these things are all really important that we talk about because it creates the idea that other people can see themselves in their shoes, right? That's the empathy piece. Storytelling. I remember there was he's still around, a great facilitator, guy called Jim Grout. He's founded the organization I work for. One of the things that he used to get complimented on the most was his stories.
Hmm.
He used to craft stories so wonderfully. And I remember asking him, how do I get better at storytelling? And he just told me I need to live longer. Is there something to the idea that, like, as much as stories are helpful, when you're young, you just don't have enough stories? Or is it possible that you can? The question I almost think, is it okay? And I'm guessing the answer is no, to fabricate a story for the
No.
benefit of a point.
I mean,
Okay.
I think I would say no, because if you're training yourself to fabricate, you're never going to become a more effective storyteller. You're going to be a more effective liar, maybe.
Yes.
Right? And I mean, maybe if you're telling stories to a child and you're wanting to engage the imagination with surrealism, great. But if you're wanting to be a more effective communicator, you need to keep it within reality. I never thought of myself as a storyteller. I was like, no, that person, they tell stories. They're a really good story. I'm like engaged. Then I realized there's a structure and there are elements. If you can keep the structure and you include the elements, you become a powerful storyteller. And you tell stories all the time. We all do. Sometimes we tell the chronology story, right? Where we just and then and then and then and then and then and then, right? We're 2 years old and we're talking about the slide or whatever it is. I mean, it's not engaging. What's engaging are the elements combined with the structure. The structure needs to start with some sort of pain, some sort of struggle, some sort of drama. Humans love drama. I mean, look at our reality shows. Like, come on, we thrive off of drama. So you need to start your story by describing the drama. Just whatever the story is, get it juicy. Make sure that your listener is really into like the pain or the drama that's happening, right? We need to follow some sort of a hero through the story. That hero could be a person, it could be an organization, it could be a country, it could be whatever. The hero, we need to be able to visualize them and feel them as well. So with a hero, I need to know a little bit about what they look like and a little bit about their personality. That helps me follow your hero. If I don't get a sense of your hero, I can't follow the story. So we start with drama. We have a hero. Now, the last thing is you really need some ups and downs. You know, if your hero is just up, 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 that's called marketing. It's good, it's effective. But if that's not what you want, you need to go up and down. So there needs to be a success, there needs to be a failure, there needs to be both, right? And then your end is whatever the outcome is. Like you find a way of matching your point to whatever is relevant to the story that you're telling. But I wouldn't focus so much about that. I would let it come out organically. You can end your story with, and that is why. And the point is, and what I learned from this, so you can create that structure. So, yeah, follow a structure, incorporate those elements, and you will be a great storyteller.
And I appreciate that because I think sometimes in advice, in facilitation, or you'll hear stuff like tell stories, but they don't say the specific of the type of stories. And if you've gone into the ands and the ands and the ends, and actually there's no direct tie-ins, or no direct tie into the story of, well, why did you just tell that?
Yeah.
Then that isn't a great way to capture the imagination or the attention of the audience, is just by sharing a random story with no appeal and no flow to it. And also want to line up the flow you suggested is what I often describe in the programming that you're doing. Have a flow to your programming when it comes to energy. You can't just go cerebral conversation activity followed by another cerebral conversation followed by another cerebral. You lose people. So you have to have that kind of flow to a program as well.
I love that you brought that up. We crave as listeners, we crave to go on an energy and an emotional roller coaster. We want to go up and down throughout the whole thing. Stories are naturally evocative in that way because they engage the part of the brains that's emotional and visual. And so we immediately go on that. And I have an entire chapter in my book about like storytelling and how to make sure that when you tell a story, especially in a setting that requires some sort of direction, that you're doing so in a way that leads to your point as well.
Salvatore, I'm going to link load in the description all of your access to you and different resources. You just referenced your book. Tell me a little bit about this book.
I'm 20 years of communication coaching combined into one book. Should be out this fall. It's called Clear and Compelling. It's communication strategies for big thinkers with bold ideas, and it will be available on Amazon, but you can go to clearingcompellingplaybook.com and sign up now, get a free download, and then you also will be updated when it becomes available.
And if I was to ask you, what would be your hope of this book? What is the outcome that you're hoping to achieve from putting this out into the world?
My goal is to create a world where everyone feels empowered to express their authentic voice. So my hope is to empower those people who find themselves shying away from expressing, people who walk away from meetings and say, I wish I had said, or people that have had mistakes as they're presenting. I want to help them feel empowered to take that seat at the table, make their statement, and lead with vision.
Well, thank you, Salvatore. And I would reiterate everything from this episode. If you hadn't got a paper in front of you and a pen and you weren't taking notes, you can go back and listen again. Always great for download numbers, but also for you to be able to list and take note of all the things that we've said, because it's an essential tool in the world of human dynamics, and we're interacting with humans, that you as an educator know how to address them in a way that is compelling and draws them in and helps to educate. Just to end on, someone reframed the idea of experiential learning to me, that it's not through learning through experience, but how do you create the best experience to maximize learning? And I think that a lot of that stems from us as the speakers in front of the room. So thank you, Salvatore. I've appreciated this wholly.
Thank you. It's been a blast.